What happens when a black woman with global influence is quietly moved out of her rightful seat, and nobody realizes who she is? This isn't just a story about travel. This is a story about power, perception, and what happens when silence meets status. In today's episode of Celebrity Undercover Told, we reveal how one overlooked moment on Flight 441 sparked a corporate shakeup that redefined an entire industry. She didn't shout. She didn't demand. She didn't even post it online. She simply remembered. And when the time was right, she moved the ground beneath them. Stay with us as we follow the journey of Dr. Maya Thompson, the tech CEO they didn't recognize but would never forget. This is more than just an airline mistake. It's the anatomy of assumption and the rise of a quiet revolution. Began on a quiet Tuesday morning in Atlanta, the kind of morning where the world hasn't quite woken up yet. The air was crisp, the sky a soft blur of gray and gold, and the airport hummed like a sleeping city beginning to stir. Dr. Maya Thompson had arrived early. She always did. Not because she was nervous, but because she believed in being prepared, in claiming her space before the world tried to take it. She moved through Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport like a woman who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. Dressed in a tailored ivory pantsuit with deep green accents, subtle blue, gold hoops, and classic tortoiseshell glasses, she didn't just walk, she glided. There was grace in her stillness, strength in her calm. At 52, Maya didn't chase respect, she carried it. Today's destination, San Francisco. A tech summit awaited, one where she wouldn't just be attending, she'd be opening it. The very first keynote speaker on the biggest cybersecurity stage of the year. Every executive that mattered in her field would be in that room. She had rehearsed her words, revised her slides, and aligned her vision with something deeper than strategy, something personal. Because this wasn't just a speech, it was a moment. And like any seasoned leader, Maya knew moments weren't gifted. They were taken. She arrived at Gate D12, boarding pass in hand, seat 1A first class. Window. Chosen not for the view, but for the solitude. No one brushing past her knees mid-flight. No elbows from strangers. Just her, a few quiet hours, and the soft click of her laptop before the summit storm. The gate agent smiled at her politely, scanned her pass, and nodded her through. Everything felt smooth. Routine until it didn't. As Maya placed her leather briefcase in the overhead bin, adjusted her posture, and settled into the familiar luxury of 1A, something shifted, not in the plane, in the air, around her. A presence, a pause. Then came the voice. Polite, practiced, crisp. Dr. Thompson. She turned to see a flight attendant. Mid-40s, blonde pixie cut, navy uniform pressed to perfection, smile tight enough to slice fruit. Yes, Maya responded, even-toned. I'm terribly sorry, but it appears we have a seating mix-up. Maya blinked. No. Furrow in her brow, no rise in her tone. Just a pause. I selected this seat when I booked, it was confirmed. Of course, and we appreciate your patience. However, we've had a last-minute adjustment. A Diamond Priority passenger has also been assigned 1A. We'd like to move you to seat 26B while we sort this out. 26B middle seat economy, near the rear galley. Maya didn't need to ask. She'd flown enough to recognize coded language, and she had felt this before, not from a seat map, but from society. She raised an eyebrow gently. Wouldn't it make more sense to ask him to wait while you sort it out? I understand, but we've already prepped the cabin. He's expected. We'd really appreciate your cooperation. Maya said nothing at first. She looked toward the boarding door. A man had just stepped onto the plane. White, early 60s, tailored cashmere coat. Didn't look up. Didn't need to. She knew the type. She didn't argue. She didn't escalate. Instead, she reached quietly for her phone, opened the voice memo app and pressed record. Then she stood, lifted her bag, and made the long walk from 1A to 26B, one step at a time. The man slid into her former seat without so much as a glance in her direction. The flight attendant beamed at him, a warmth that hadn't made it to Maya, not once. Seat 26B was cramped, predictably, one armrest already claimed. The man beside her coughed, wet and unbothered. A teenager with a gaming console snorted beside her, but Maya didn't react. She never did right away. Her fingers stayed still, her gaze even. The audio recording saved to her cloud, the document saved in her mind. Because Maya Thompson wasn't a consultant. She wasn't some mid-level manager hoping to impress someone. She was the founder and CEO of Novatech Solutions, the firm currently contracted to rebuild the digital architecture of Aero Global Airlines, the very company whose crew just removed her from her rightful seat. That email she had just sent before boarding? It was to Aero Global's VP of Compliance. Subject: line, final integration plan, data security and access protocols. She was the architect behind the future of their passenger systems, but they didn't see her. They saw what they thought she was, and what they thought didn't matter, until it did. And in about 5 minutes, 'twould. Because this wasn't just a flight anymore. It was about to become a case study in assumptions and a reminder of what happens when the invisible holds more power than the visible. Maya closed her eyes and waited, not in defeat, but in calculation. She didn't want the seat back. She wanted the system to feel what it had just done. And they all would, because the woman they thought they could ignore, she just hit record. She sat in silence, not because she had nothing to say, but because she'd learned the value of holding power in quiet spaces. Dr. Maya Thompson had been here before, not on this flight, but in this moment, the moment where people looked at her and saw someone smaller than she was, where credentials disappeared under skin tone, where suits looked past her to find someone who looked more familiar. But Maya wasn't just a CEO. She was the CEO. Novatech Solutions wasn't born in a boardroom. It was built on her kitchen table, in a 2-bedroom apartment in Durham, North Carolina. 12 years ago, she was a single mother with 2 part-time jobs and a laptop that froze every 20 minutes. And still, she coded through it. She stayed up long past bedtime stories and dishes and deadlines. She created tools that caught threats before they became breaches. She saw cybersecurity not just as code, but as consequence. Protect people first. Data second. That was her mantra. The industry hadn't made space for her, so she carved her own. And 3 months ago, Novatech Solutions was acquired by Aero Global Enterprises, a $520 million deal. Signed, sealed, and announced in every major tech outlet. They called it bold, visionary, a signal that Aero Global was ready to secure its future, not just patch its past. Her name was on that acquisition. So was her face. But somehow, the crew on Flight 441 hadn't gotten the memo. They didn't know that the woman in Seat 1A was the reason their airline hadn't made headlines last December, because it was Maya's team that uncovered the breach. A vulnerability that could have exposed 28 million passenger records, names, addresses, payment info. Her team fixed it before it leaked, quietly, efficiently. They didn't need a spotlight. They just needed it done right. And yet this morning, all that legacy, all that expertise, was traded in for an older man in a wool coat and a loyalty status badge. He didn't see her, not really, and maybe he never would. But this wasn't about him, not anymore. It was about the system that said, yes, we know what she's done, but we still prefer someone who looks the part. Maya reached for her tablet. No Wi-Fi yet. Just her thoughts, her timeline, and a silent record of every shift in energy around her. The attendants moved differently now. She saw the way they glanced her way, saw the recognition begin to set in. Maybe someone in the galley had Googled her name. Maybe they whispered, "She's that Maya Thompson." But Maya didn't flinch. She didn't need them to scramble. She needed them to sit with it. The quiet harm, the subtle disregard, the assumption. She thought of her daughter, Ava, now in college, studying data science. She remembered the first time Ava asked, "Mom, why do people ask if you're the assistant when you're the boss?" And Maya hadn't had an easy answer. She just said, "Because some people only believe what they've seen before, and they've never seen me." That was changing now, slowly but not fast enough. Because the truth was, you can't out-educate bias. You can't out-earn invisibility. Not always, not everywhere. Sometimes the only thing that speaks louder than experience is evidence. And Maya had both. She looked toward the front of the cabin. The man in 1A was already sipping a scotch, reclined, at peace. He had no idea he was sitting in a story, one that would outlive the flight, one that would outlast his whiskey. Maya pulled up her notes for the summit, refocused, realigned, because this was still her day, still her moment, and no seat, no smile, no system could take that away. Not anymore. She breathed in, deep, slow, centered. They had seen her as less. Soon they'd see how wrong they were, not because she demanded it, but because she designed it. This was no accident. This was legacy in motion, power disguised as poise. And the next chapter was already writing itself. The plane hadn't taken off yet, but something in the cabin had already shifted, not in altitude, but in energy. Maya felt it, like the tremor that comes before a storm, subtle, but certain. She sat in 26B, back straight, knees tucked, breath slow, elbows barely fitting between armrests. No room, but plenty of clarity. She had already pressed send. The email to Aero Global's COO, Victor Lang. Subject line, Incident on Flight 441. It was short, precise, intentionally calm. Earlier today, I was removed from my confirmed first-class seat without explanation. A white male passenger was given priority without verification of status or assignment. I was relocated to economy. This is both a matter of protocol and principle. I expect immediate acknowledgement. She hit send, then waited, not for a reply, but for the effect. Maya understood timing. She didn't need to raise her voice. She'd already raised her profile. The captain's voice came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 441 to San Francisco." But she wasn't listening to the words. She was listening to what wasn't being said. Then came the first sign. The lead flight attendant passed her row, paused, looked, noticed her name, the one she hadn't spoken since boarding. But now, it sat on her ticket, on her email, and maybe on their manifest. The woman's posture tightened. She didn't smile this time, she swallowed instead. Hard, Maya watched, not with malice, with memory. She wasn't keeping score. She was keeping record. 1 minute later, the same flight attendant returned, bending slightly, voice low. "Dr. Thompson, we've just been informed of a seating error." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Have you?" "Yes. We're happy to offer you your original seat. It's now available." "Did the passenger leave?" A pause, a beat too long. "He offered to switch. Or was he told?" Silence. Maya didn't blink. "I'll stay here." The woman hesitated. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. It wasn't about the seat, it was about the message. About letting the discomfort land where it belonged." Maya looked out the window. Dark clouds hovered, but the runway was clear. Much like her thoughts, she didn't need to be moved. She needed the moment to move them. 5 rows ahead, whispers. Traveled faster than drink carts. One woman tapped her husband's arm. "That's her," she murmured. "Heard her speak last year. Cybersecurity genius." Someone else typed a name into Google, hit the first headline, then gasped. Maya didn't notice. Or maybe she did. She just didn't care. Because she wasn't here to be recognized. She was here to be respected. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her assistant. "PR just called. They're asking if you're on Flight 441. You good?" Maya smiled. Just barely. She typed back one word. Solid. She opened her video app, replayed the clip. The voice of the flight attendant, polite. Firm, dismissive. We need to seat the other passenger immediately. She let it play once. Then again. This time, volume up just enough for the woman beside her to hear. No words were exchanged, but the woman shifted, uncomfortable, aware. Good. Let her sit with it too. Maya turned off the video, locked the screen, above. Then the plane began to taxi. Engines low, tension high. 30,000 feet wouldn't erase what happened on the ground, but it might just amplify the silence that followed. And sometimes silence wasn't weakness. It was pressure. It was presence. It was power in its most elegant form, and in a few minutes, that pressure would reach the people who mattered most, because Maya Thompson wasn't just seated in economy. She was seated at the center of the system's blind spot, and the people who put her there. We're about to see what happens when visibility becomes a mirror, and this flight was just getting started. 6 time zones away, in a high-rise office in downtown Seattle, Victor Lang hadn't even finished his coffee. It was 7:52 a.m., and the email subject flashing across his screen stopped him mid-sip. Incident on Flight 441, from Maya Thompson. The Maya Thompson. Victor didn't read it twice, he didn't need to. The words were precise, measured, dangerous, not because they were loud, but because they didn't have to be. He knew what this meant. He'd worked long enough in risk and compliance to recognize a quiet warning when he saw one, and this one was glowing red. He picked up the phone. Get Sky Connect's head of in-flight operations, now. Less than 3 minutes later, his office door opened. Candice Morell, VP of Corporate Communications, entered without knocking. She was already scrolling her phone. It's starting to move, she said. No tags yet, no official post, but the tech whisper networks are lighting up. Victor nodded. How long do we have? Candice didn't look up. An hour, maybe less, depends if someone leaks her name or that video. He stood. Start the review. I want crew IDs, manifest logs, seat assignment protocols, everything. Candice raised an eyebrow. That fast? Victor looked at her. She's the architect of our new digital infrastructure. We just made her the face of our future, and this morning we put her in the middle seat. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was strategic. We need to move, he said. I want the flight crew grounded the moment they land. No delays, no questions. Candice paused. Victor, that crew has 20 years of clean records. Are you sure? He cut her off. 20 years of clean records doesn't matter if one moment goes viral. She nodded slowly. Understood. Back. In the air, the crew didn't know what was coming, but they could feel it. The lead attendant's iPad buzzed mid-aisle. She read something, stopped walking. Maya noticed. So did the man across the aisle. So did the woman behind her, whispering now to her husband. A shift was happening. One no seatbelt. Could secure. In the cockpit, the co-pilot leaned toward the captain. Something's up, he murmured. Corporate just pinged. The captain tapped the screen beside him. His jaw tightened. He exhaled. This wasn't turbulence, this was accountability. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, the message had made its rounds. At 38,000 feet, the crew was under review, in real time, with real consequences. Meanwhile, Victor's office turned into a war room. Senior executives filed in. No one touched their coffee. We're dealing with a reputational liability, Candice said. Not just because of who she is, but because of what this says about us. The CMO leaned forward. We just launched our equity campaign last month. Victor shot him a look. And this is what our equity looks like when no one's watching. They all knew what was at stake. Novatech's acquisition hadn't just been about code. It had been a message that Aero Global was building a safer, smarter, more inclusive future, and now they were at risk of undermining it. One seat at a time. Victor looked at the legal team. Draft the internal notice. The crew is to be suspended pending full review. Then to Candice. If the story breaks before we act, we're reacting. If we act first, we control the tone. She was already typing. Consider it done. Back. On the plane, the lead flight attendant passed Maya's row again. Slower this time. Less sure. Dr. Thompson, she said, leaning closer. We want to extend our sincere apologies. Would you like a refreshment? Maya didn't smile, didn't blink. No, thank you. Not because she was unkind, but because kindness without awareness was theater, and she wasn't interested in acting. She looked out the window. Clouds blanketed the earth below, but the real storm? It was just beginning to land. San Francisco looked soft beneath the clouds, golden rooftops, crisscrossed streets, a city waking up. But in the Sky Connect Executive Lounge at Terminal 4, no one was relaxing. Two men in gray suits met Maya at the jet bridge. No name tags, just quiet urgency. Dr. Thompson? Yes. We've been instructed to escort you to the lounge. Mr. Lang would like to speak with you directly. She nodded. Didn't ask questions. Didn't need to. The hallway was hushed. Travelers passed, with rolling bags and empty coffee cups. Only a few noticed her, but one did. A young woman, maybe 24, paused mid-step. She gasped, then whispered to her friend, "That's her, from the summit posters." Maya kept walking, back straight, composure intact. Inside the lounge, Victor Lang stood waiting. No assistant, no coffee, just him. He looked exhausted, like a man who'd had a dozen meetings in his head before breakfast. Dr. Thompson, thank you for making time. She didn't sit. Let's get to it. I want to begin with a formal apology on behalf of the airline and of myself. Maya held his gaze. An apology doesn't fix a pattern. It patches a symptom. Victor didn't flinch. We agree. The crew has been suspended pending termination. That decision is in motion. She tilted her head. That fast? You were removed from a confirmed seat without protocol by a team that ignored every layer of procedure. Had you not sent that email, we'd be reading about it in headlines. 6 hours from now, he didn't sugarcoat, didn't spin. Maya respected that at least. What else? She asked. Victor inhaled. We're launching a full review of internal policy, but we want more than paperwork. We want impact. He paused. We're inviting you to join the Internal Ethics Board. Policy, training, flight protocol, full access, no NDA. Maya raised an eyebrow. You want me to help clean the mess your team didn't even notice? We want to change it, he said. We want your voice inside the system. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out a folded paper, a printed photo of her standing in front of Novatech's first server in her garage, 2013. I built this because I was tired of waiting for people to protect the things that mattered. Now you want me to protect your name? Victor nodded. Yes, and more importantly, help us rebuild what our assumptions almost destroyed. She stood still. Then, I'll speak. Speak? At your next leadership summit. On stage. No script, no edit. Victor hesitated. About this flight? About all of it, the seat, the silence. The split-second decisions that define who belongs. He nodded slowly. Understood. And after that, Maya added, I'll decide if I want to help you fix it. 2 weeks later, she stood beneath a spotlight in Phoenix. 400 executives in pressed suits. Phones silenced. Eyes wide, she didn't pace, didn't raise her voice. She told a story about being moved from her seat, about the tone of the flight attendant. The quiet dismissal. She described the way people assumed, the way they looked right through her. She didn't shame, she showed. And when she finished, she paused, then said, You don't have to mean harm to cause it. But once you see it, the harm see what you do next, that's your leadership. Silence, then applause, not polite, not performative, earned. And when she walked off stage, people stood, not just to clap, to learn, to listen. Because Maya Thompson hadn't just reclaimed her seat. She'd amplified her voice and in doing so, lifted others with it. Change didn't happen overnight, but it started faster than anyone expected. Within a week of Maya's speech, Sky Connect released its first major statement. Not a generic apology, Not a vague, "we're looking into it." This was different. Specific, structured, strategic. The airline committed to a full operational audit. All flight crew behavior logs would be reviewed. All training programs reevaluated. From onboarding to in-flight conflict resolution. But more importantly, they were adding a new position to their executive suite, Chief Equity Officer. Not just a title, a department, with resources, with teeth. And guess who they asked to help build it? Maya. She didn't say yes. Not yet, but she gave them the blueprint. A plan that went beyond damage control. It included data transparency, flight crew feedback loops, passenger incident escalation standards, mandatory cultural fluency training, and consequences tied directly to leadership KPIs. Because as Maya put it, if you want real change, you have to tie it to power. And people noticed. Industry blogs called it bold. Some called it reactive. But passengers? They called it necessary. Emails poured in, not just to Maya, but to the airline. Messages from people who had been treated like afterthoughts, who were used, to being shifted, silenced, ignored, and now they saw something shift. Finally, one letter stood out. A woman wrote, "I watched your summit speech with my teenage daughter. We both cried, not because of what happened, but because of how you answered it. You didn't shout, you stood. And now I feel like maybe I can too." Maya read that one twice, then framed it. She didn't need the applause. She needed the ripple, and the ripple had become a wave. Across the industry, other airlines took note. JetPath announced a review of their loyalty priority algorithms. Aeroflight opened a bias incident reporting app, and Global Wings added diversity metrics to hiring promotions. None of this was coincidence. It was cause and effect. Maya hadn't asked for change. She forced it, not with threats, not with outrage, with clarity, with documentation, with undeniable truth. Her face wasn't just on tech magazines anymore. It showed up in leadership case studies, business school lectures, and yes, social feeds. But Maya never posted the video, never tweeted the clip. She didn't have to. The world saw what happened, and more importantly, they saw how she responded, because that was the lesson. In a world so quick to react, she strategized. In a system used to silence, she recorded. And while others raged, she reshaped. That's why the headlines didn't fade. They evolved. From "Black CEO removed from first-class seat" to "Airline restructures after CEO exposes bias." From "Boardroom discrimination" to "Blueprint for corporate accountability." Because Maya didn't just cause a shakeup. She caused a shift, and the tremor is still echoing. In boardrooms, in training rooms, in the quiet moments before decisions are made. People ask different questions now. Who's in the room? Who's being overlooked? And what do we assume when we don't double-check? All because one woman refused to make a scene and made a system take a look at itself instead. Not just a passenger, not just a leader, a catalyst. And once the catalyst hits the core, the chain reaction doesn't stop and it expands. One policy, one conversation, one flight at a time. Some changes happen on paper. Others happen in the heart. For Maya Thompson, this journey was never just about a seat. It was about what that seat represented. Power, visibility, belonging. After the summit, she didn't jump into more headlines. She returned home. To Durham. To quiet. To clarity. She watered her garden. Walked her dog. Watched old movies with her daughter during long Sunday afternoons. Because before she was a CEO, she was a mother, a daughter, a black woman navigating rooms that weren't built for her. And even now, even after all the recognition, there were moments she still felt like she had to prove herself. That's what this world does sometimes. It praises you in public, then questions you in private. She remembered the first time someone called her ma'am on a flight. She was 27. It wasn't respect, it was suspicion. The way the attendant triple-checked her boarding pass. The way the man in the next seat offered to help her find the right row. She hadn't said a word. But she remembered, because when you've been invisible in plain sight, you learn to remember everything, not out of anger, but awareness. That awareness was Maya's gift and her burden. She didn't share that with the world, but she wrote it down, in journals, in voice notes at midnight, in letters to herself she never mailed. She reread one of them now, a page torn from an old notebook. You are not an exception. You are evidence. That brilliance doesn't come with one look. That leadership doesn't sound one way. That dignity doesn't always speak loud. Sometimes it just sits calmly in seat 26B and waits. She smiled, not because it was poetic, but because it was true. Leadership wasn't always visible. Sometimes it looked like restraint. Sometimes it looked like silence. And other times, it looked like someone who'd been counted out choosing not to count themselves out too. Maya reflected often, but she didn't dwell. She used those reflections to mentor, to guide, to build new systems with new voices at the table. She started a fellowship program, not for tech prodigies, but for late bloomers, mothers returning to code, veterans transitioning into data security, Black women who'd been told they didn't fit, because Maya knew talent didn't always arrive in the packaging people expected. And sometimes, the most powerful change came from those who had been made to sit in the back until they built their own front row. She spoke at high schools, universities, women's shelters. She never told the airline story on those stages, but she didn't need to. Her presence was enough, her calm, her truth, her refusal to shrink. One young girl once asked, "Weren't you scared they'd ignore you forever?" Maya replied, "Maybe. But the moment you stop speaking because no one's listening, you've already lost your voice. And I was never going to give mine up for free." She never did, not even now. Because for Maya, power wasn't about control. It was about choice. And every day she chose to rise, to speak, to stay visible, even when the world tried to look past her, especially then. By the time spring rolled into summer, the story had settled, not into silence, but into something deeper, into systems, into policies, into practice. Sky Connect's internal reforms had begun to show. Hiring had shifted. Onboarding now included bias recognition training. Flight attendants now wore compassion with the same weight as uniforms. Not everyone agreed with the changes. Some called it overcorrection. Others whispered publicity stunt. But Maya knew the truth. Systems don't shift when people feel comfortable. They shift when they feel seen. And now people saw. On a Tuesday morning in July, Maya received a call from Victor Lang. No assistant. No scheduling. Just him. "We're sending you the draft this week," he said. Of what? "The new policy charter. You'll see your fingerprints all over it." She didn't reply with excitement, just quiet satisfaction, because this wasn't about praise. It was about permanence. A few weeks later, she boarded a flight again, same airline, different city, new crew. She wore a soft blue blazer, carried the same brown leather briefcase. This time, when she scanned her pass, the agent looked up and smiled. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Thompson. We've got you in 1A. It wasn't the seat that mattered. It was the recognition. A stewardess offered her tea before takeoff. Another asked if she needed workspace lighting. None of it felt performative. It felt aware. It felt like progress. She closed her eyes, exhaled. Not because she needed rest, but because she needed to remember this moment used to be unimaginable. Her phone buzzed. A message from her daughter. "Mom, you still changing the world?" Maya replied, "Just one row at a time." And that was enough. Back on the ground, the changes kept coming. Other companies reached out. One asked her to consult on inclusive design and app architecture. Another wanted to feature her in a documentary about quiet leadership. She said yes to some, no to most, because Maya had learned impact isn't about everything. It's about what lasts. She returned to teaching. Once a week at her local university, she didn't teach code. She taught culture, how to lead teams where no one feels replaceable, how to build products that protect everyone equally. Students leaned in when she spoke, not because she was famous, but because she was real. At the end of one class, a student approached her. "Professor Thompson," he said, "I read about your flight. Thank you for staying calm. I don't think I could have." Maya smiled. "You don't have to be calm, you just have to be clear." Anger fades, clarity echoes, and hers had echoed. For across airlines, across industries, across anyone who ever wondered, will I be seen for who I am? Because in the end, this was never just about first class. It was about first chances, about making space where none was offered, about refusing to be invisible when the world expected silence. Maya Thompson didn't change everything, but she changed enough. Enough for one girl to believe she could belong. Enough for one company to rewire its core. Enough for one story to become the start of many more. As the flight began to descend, she looked out the window. Sunlight touched the wing. The sky stretched wide. A new horizon, not just for her, for all of us, because sometimes it only takes one seat, one voice, one moment, to shift the altitude for everyone. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not yell. It's not clap back, it's not even fight. It's sit still, record everything, and let the truth speak louder than your voice ever could. Dr. Maya Thompson never asked for revenge. She built a roadmap for justice. She didn't take the seat back. She made the whole plane rethink who belonged where. If you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, talked down to, or passed over, let this remind you, you are not the only one. And sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one they didn't notice. You are not here to prove your worth. You are here to move systems. So if this story moved you, share it. Because someone out there needs to hear it before they give up, before they shrink, before they choose silence over self. And remember this: the world doesn't change just because someone speaks up. It changes when someone powerful stays quiet long, enough to be underestimated, then speaks so clearly no one can ever look away again.